This is a massive, immersive script designed for a long-form documentary, 30 to 40 minutes. I've removed all chapters and intros to give you a continuous, dark, and highly detailed narrative flow in English. The silence of the Theban necropolis masks a secret that history has tried to bury for 3,000 years. The year is 1110 BC, and the sun is setting on the reign of Ramesses IX. Egypt, once the supreme superpower of the Mediterranean, is now a decaying corpse. The gold mines of Kush have run dry. The grain silos are being raided by starving peasants, and the great green sea is filled with invaders. The empire is bankrupt, but in the dark alleys of Thebes, a terrifying realization begins to spread among the elite. The living have nothing, but the dead are sleeping on mountains of gold. This is the moment the social contract shattered. This is the moment when the state decided that the past was a resource to be mined. High above the Nile, in the village of Deir el-Medina, the elite artisans are waiting. These are not common laborers. They are the most skilled architects, draftsmen, and stonemasons in the world. They are the men who designed the labyrinthine traps of the Valley of the Kings. But their rations of wheat and barley are months overdue. Their children are crying from hunger. In the archives of dark records, we find the strike papyrus, documenting the first time workers ever laid down their tools in protest. But the strike was only a facade. Behind the closed doors of their limestone huts, these master craftsmen were making a pact. They knew every secret entrance, every hidden chamber, and every weakness in the royal security. They realized that the gold of the pharaohs was the only thing that could save them from starvation. The looting did not begin with a desperate break-in. It was executed with the surgical precision of an engineering project. The stonemason named Amenpanafer led a team of 8 men, including water carriers and carpenters. They did not attack the main entrance of the tomb of King Sobekane. They knew the guards were stationed there. Instead, they used a technique that only an insider would know. They began tunneling through the rock from a nearby, lesser tomb, cutting through meters of solid limestone with bronze chisels. They worked in the dead of night, using specialized oil lamps that produced a dim light without the telltale black smoke of torches. Each strike of the hammer was timed to the sounds of the desert wind. They were not just thieves. They were the very men who had built the tomb, now dismantling it with cold, professional efficiency. When they finally breached the burial chamber, the sight was enough to drive a man mad. Gold leaf covered the walls, and the sarcophagus was a solid block of precious metal. But there was no time for awe. The papyri record that the thieves fell upon the royal mummy with the violence of starving animals. They didn't just take the jewelry, they desecrated the divine. They used bronze knives to hack the fingers off the mummy to reach the heavy gold rings. They crushed the skull of the king to extract the amulets of power tucked inside the bandages. To speed up the process, they dragged the wooden coffins into the center of the room and set them on fire. This was done to melt away the gold and silver inlay, turning priceless artifacts into raw, unrecognizable nuggets of metal. In that fire, they didn't just burn wood. They burned the Egyptian belief in the afterlife. They murdered the king's soul for the second time, all to fill a few leather bags with bullion. The most chilling revelation in this investigation is that this was not a secret for long. The crime reached the very heart of the government. The mayor of Western Thebes, a man named Pora, was the silent partner in the operation. He wasn't just a corrupt official. He was a warlord running a state-sponsored mafia. He provided the looters with tools, intelligence, and protection from the vizier's guards. In exchange, Pora took a 20% cut of every tomb they emptied. This was a shadow tax. When the mayor of the East, an honest man named Pacer, tried to blow the whistle on the corruption, Pora didn't run a fugi beg. He used the stolen gold to bribe the viziers, scribes, and intimidate witnesses. He even organized a public celebration to mock the investigators. The law in Egypt had become a commodity, bought and paid for with the blood gold of the ancestors. This gold didn't stay in the pockets of thieves. It was laundered through the great temples of Ammon. High priests, who were supposed to be the guardians of morality, oversaw the melting down of the royal treasures. They transformed the sacred masks of kings into plain gold bars that could be traded on the open market. This laundered wealth was the only thing keeping the 20th dynasty alive. It was used to pay the salaries of the Libyan mercenary army that protected the borders. It was used to buy massive shipments of grain from foreign traders who didn't care if their payment came from a stolen tomb. The pharaoh himself, sitting in his palace at Pyramus, was complicit. He knew that his administration was being funded by the desecration of his own lineage. The state was literally eating itself to survive another year. The final act of this tragedy was a total surrender to chaos. The high priests of the later dynasties eventually realized that the Valley of the Kings was no longer a sacred site. It was a target. In a desperate midnight operation, they performed what they called a sacred extraction. They gathered the remaining mummies of the great kings Ramesses the second, Seti the first, Thutmose the Great. They stripped them of their final amulets, ostensibly to protect the gold, and dumped the naked, broken bodies into a single, unmarked pit. The greatest conquerors the world had ever known ended up piled on top of each other like common refugees in a hole in the cliffside. The Valley of the Kings was left a ghost town, a series of hollow, scarred tunnels. The dream of eternity had been sold for a few bags of grain. Egypt had consumed its past, and in doing so, it had forfeited its future. The Golden Age was over, replaced by an age of iron, debt, and the eternal silence of the sands.